You know, one of the great things about, let's say if we're talking just about eventing, I know that probably people here are in many disciplines, you know, Philip being, you know, one of the top event riders in the world, when he's looking at a horse for a prospect, he's looking at a horse to go 4-star and an international horse. The wonderful thing about our sport is that there are many, many levels, going from 4-star, 3-star, and then right on down through beginner, novice, and I think now they even have an elementary and grasshopper, something like this. And so many times a horse that might not be suitable for one of the top professionals has many, many other levels it can go to. I agree with Philip. The horse is long. I would also like to say that I don't mind a horse that's a little bit on the long side. There's been a very good study of show jumpers, and often if you look at top show jumpers where there's been a confirmation clinics given, many top show jumpers, a horse that's a fairly long horse is sometimes known to be able to stretch out over a jump a little bit more, and sometimes they can exhibit quite good scope. I do not find this horse to be offensively long. He is longer than the last horse. Also, many of you are familiar, just to make a veterinary comment, there's this condition people call colloquially kissing spine, you know, dorsal spinous compression. You realize that they all have the same number of vertebrae, except for Arabians, and a horse that is longer has more space in which to fit that same number of vertebrae. So when I look at a horse that has a longer back, and I think that they're trying to fit their dorsal spinous processes in there, I don't necessarily look at that as a negative, as long as the horse, you know, from my veterinary standpoint, has the other attributes that we're looking for.
Sold as a 2-year-old at the OBS sales in Ocala for $95,000. He is unraced. Of course, every time they got him close to racing, something would come up, a little here, little something here, a little something there. Primarily some suspensory issues, which obviously take a long time to heal, so they'd give him a year off, try it again, then the next one would, they'd have the next problem. So anyhow, he has not raced, but he has been in race training off and on for the last 4 years. El Paso.
Great. Well, I mean, I love the type of horse, and it's not just his color, it's just the way he looks about, and you know, he looks to me as if he's got a lot of scope and potential. So, you know, this is the kind of horse that, you know, when I said you have to pick through the thoroughbreds, to me this is, you know, his bone is probably not super, like, you could get a little bit bigger boned horse, but he's a, you know, a really classic thoroughbred type that I think would be appealing to, you know, lots of levels, whether it's a lower level or he, you know, looks like he could be an upper level prospect as well. He's got a, you know, nice shape to him, good expression, and you know, beautiful thoroughbred type.
Little unfair that we didn't get to see the other two trot, but well, exactly what Philip just said. You know, you look at the horse, and he's just one of those that you go, wow. You know, he's not only does he have a beautiful hair coat and, you know, very healthy looking and so forth, he's kind of put together in the package of size, shape, frame, where the neck is set on the trunk and so forth. When I look at him, he's probably, maybe he's probably the tallest, but closest if we could put a weight tape, which they're extremely accurate, on the horse. He's probably the heaviest of the three, just in total poundage. And then his, one of the things I look at, I had mentioned balance before, the overall balance of the horse. I call it their underpinnings. If you look at the horse just kind of from the knee down and the hock down, he's a bit finer. The chestnut horse first had a bit of bigger bone structure in his distal limbs in front and hind. And history is very, very important to us when we begin an exam on any animal, which we do a lot of. We always say, what's the history? Could you tell us what is the reason for which the animal's presenting? What is the complaint? Which in medical terms is what do you think is wrong with the horse? Why you would like us to examine him. You can see he's got some little maybe freeze fire marks or whatever on the inside of that one front. Basically, to me, a horse that was given a few years chance to race and has not made it in racing, to me is a pretty good question to look and see maybe why it didn't happen. Also, to me, when he walks, he has a fairly short step behind and doesn't step up very much underneath to the front feet, where the chestnut horse step under quite far. And so even though this has a little bit of a wow look, I probably want to look a little bit closer at him, and because he's such a beautiful type of horse. And then when he trots, he is a little bit on his toes, dancing behind. And so just medically, I'd want to evaluate all that pretty closely so we didn't get too overwhelmed by the first impression of the horse's beauty, which he is.
She raced 29 times. Her last race was in 2009, and I believe shortly after her last race, she went over to Chris McCarron's school as well. So she's come to us, clean legs. We haven't had any issues with her. She's just starting to get used to being turned out and into a routine again when we're here in the arena. Obviously, she's not seen jumps before, and it's a shiny penny.
So probably, I'd put her in the sort of mid-range of all of them. She probably doesn't, obviously a lot would depend on how she rides and how easy she is to connect and go together. I mean, she's a nice type without, having the wow factor. She's sort of got a nice swing to her the way she moves. So, I certainly wouldn't discount her. But it would come down to how she feels when you ride and what kind of balance she has under saddle.
A horse that's run 29 times, one of the first things I think about it is this horse has some very good musculoskeletal integrity. Also, she's come here without injury, and precisely what Philip said. She maybe doesn't have as much of a wow factor, but when you start to take her apart and look at her, there's really nothing wrong about her. So to me, with a horse like that, she's probably given a good, testimony of her own soundness, and so then probably it would come out to be how well does she ride, how trainable is she. She's obviously a little more keyed up than the others, but she's newer to this, and she also has a look of quite a lot of power about her. One of the things that we can't see in here because we're in sand and we don't really have enough time is quality of a horse's foot, and as most of us know, many thoroughbreds have thinner walled feet and thinner soled feet than some pure horses bred for sport, and this is something that obviously is very important to look at when you start talking about eventing on firm ground and long distances. But there's nothing at all offensive about her, I see.
She had one start, and she also only had earnings of $435. She's a very, actually I've dealt with this filly before because I also help out with the stable that owned her, and she's a very sweet filly at the track, no issues. She's completely sound. They just didn't want to drop her in a claiming race, so she came to us instead. The only problem they had at the track was keeping weight on her, which is obvious here. She still hasn't filled out in less than a month's time, but that will come.
Well, I think there's a lot of potential there in the way she's, her conformation. It goes without saying there's not much muscle there. And so, they all let down a little bit differently. Obviously, I'm sure you've all dealt with, stomach ulcers are a big issue with the thoroughbred horses. And so, when you look at a horse like this, you're looking at a long before, you got to picture what she'd look like, muscled up and with a lot more weight on and stronger. And so,
And she tried to place this mare off of their farm for about a year and a half, 2 years, privately, not with any advertisement or anything. And so she contacted us and said, we really need to find her a home. She's been hanging out here for a year and a half, 2 years. And so here's Sue said, 6 starts.
This is a pretty hard test for green horses to come in with, to be put in center stage like this. But obviously she's having a little bit of a meltdown, a little bit worse than the others. So, if you're going to take this horse on and you're going to put, the next 5 or 6 years of your life into it, I mean, I get the feeling that she's not going to accept the training. I think once she did put some weight on and strengthen it up, I mean, she'd be a pretty good type. She's, she's probably going to come up, the wither will come up a little bit more as she gets a bit older. So I'd be sort of interested in trying her. She's, got the makings and the potential of, developing into a bigger, stronger, pretty nice horse. I mean, she's got nice connection, with her to the neck. Her rump sort of slopes down, which I find often is a good jumping type of horse. So I think, you're going to take a little bit of a risk in what she's like to put weight on and how to deal with, but, I'm pretty impressed with her. I like her.
I quite like this horse, actually. It's one of those, like, anyone would call it a diamond in the rough. Obviously the horses, you're mostly familiar with that body score system where a horse gets a body score of 3 or 4 or 5, 6, whatever, which is an international system, so we can rate horses on their body score. So this horse is quite light, but to me, when I see it, if you can imagine this horse with 125 pounds of weight and muscle in the right places, I think this is quite a beautiful horse. You also mostly see, if you drop a plumb line down from the back of her hip, down her hock, her hocks and her lower leg is built very underneath her. So she actually already has her hind end underneath her, which is one of the challenges in some thoroughbreds, in that they've been going for the first few years of their life on their front end. And so she's kind of naturally built underneath herself. And I like the horse a lot, and could see with some maybe bunch of grass and other medical workup, make sure that there isn't a GI problem on her. I think it could be quite a stunning looking horse, actually.
Here's Susay, 6 starts.
Well, this is a pretty hard test for green horses to come in to be put in center stage like this, but obviously she's having a little bit of a meltdown, a little bit worse than the others. So, if you're going to take this horse on and you're going to put, the next 5 or 6 years of your life into it, I mean, I get the feeling that she's not going to accept the training. When she gets nervous, it affects the way she trots, and so I think there's a fair bit of work in trying to settle a horse like this down and re-educate it and find a new career with it. I mean, as a type, she's not too bad. Could have a little bit more range and scope to everything there, but the biggest concern I'd have is how quiet and easy she'd be to train.
Having been a student of Philip's for quite a few years, one of the first things I learned from him, and I think he's probably put this in print, and I haven't read the book start to finish, but one of the things I've heard him say many times, I'll take a horse with a great temperament and a great mind and trainability over raw talent. And it's very unfair to the poor little mare because it's something she's not used to. But I'm in agreement with what Philip says. There's absolutely nothing offensive about the horse at all. But you have to wonder, temperament is absolutely key to training a horse and for them being in environment. As some of you probably saw with the dressage, if you got over there, how imperative it is that the horse be quiet.